What's the most F-up secret you've discovered about someone close to you? Let's find out. Story 1. The 24 hours before my dad died, stage 4 lung cancer. He was in the ER and then the ICU, and we were unable to be with him because of hospital COVID rules. My mother, sister, and myself had been texting and calling him all day and got no response. My mother even called the hospital and spoke with one of his ICU nurses, who said he was awake and communicating fine. He passed very quickly at 3:30 a.m. the next morning. We were allowed to be at his bedside, but by then he was no longer conscious, so we said our goodbyes and he was gone. Later that morning while my mom slept, I was calling cremation services to schedule his body for pickup at the hospital, and going through his bag of belongings the hospital had returned to us. His phone was in there, and I wanted to read all our texts and take some comfort in my last words to him. I opened his phone and all our texts had not been read, not mine or my mom and sister's. I thought this was so odd, but figured he must have been suffering so much he couldn't find the strength. I began to scroll through his apps and noticed a chat app I'd vaguely heard of. I can't recall the name, but it essentially works like WhatsApp. I opened the app and saw a single contact with a female name. I started reading and realized my dad has been chatting with this girl hourly for the last 24 hours, and as far back as I could scroll. He was calling her princess and telling her he loved her, and she was saying she was scared for him and wanted to know what was going on, why was he in the ER, etc. I scrolled back enough to know that this was someone he was having at the very least an emotional affair with. My grief was completely hijacked by hurt and anger, and a week later I tracked the girl down and spoke to her, via DMS, and found out she was 19 years old. She was 17 when they met. He was her high school bus driver, and she told me they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old when he passed away, and dating someone younger than his grandchildren, someone he chose to spend his last moments with and say his last goodbyes to. I hope it made him happy, but it sure is a shitty secret to live the rest of my life with. A secret that will forever overshadow my entire relationship with my dad with no chance to ever speak to him about it. It's the one secret I wish I'd never found out. Story 2. I don't know how disturbing this is. It turned out pretty fantastic for one. But not for another. I was adopted, and told a silly magical story about my birth parents that most certainly did not seem true even when I was a child. At 57, I learned I was the result of a college affair between a very seriously Jewish young man and a very Baptist young woman. She was rushed off to a home for wayward girls to give birth. He followed her there many states away, begging her to keep me and live a life together. But their families both said absolutely not. Jewish people were not viewed as white in the mid-60s, and her family most certainly did not want her marrying a non-white. Plus, she was a very committed Christian and did not want to convert to Judaism. So off I went, into another family. I recently discovered 3 lovely half-siblings, and we are all pro or semi-pro musicians and get along well. I never got to meet my mother. She died a year before I searched. My father is out of the picture and wants to be left alone. And I'm fine with that. I'm grateful for the love he gave me. It was enough. Another person that was in my non-bio family was also adopted. She was older than me. She tracked down her mom later in life, too. She was in a hospital and had been since the day she was born. She was born holistically disabled, physical, mental, cognitive, learning, sensory, and was raped by an orderly. And she discovered she was the result. Endings to our searching are not always happy. Story 3. She was my best friend of 7 years. We had literally been through it all together. I moved out of state with my now husband, but she convinced us both to move back to be closer with her, after about a year. We had no real ties to the state we had tried out, so we said screw it, let's go back, she's basically family. We were all so happy to be reunited. She was over almost every night for dinner. We all laughed and talked and had a blast. Best year of my life. Then slowly, she started trying to turn my husband and I against each other. Anytime we had an argument, like any couple does, she would text each of us about how right we were, trying to foster animosity between the two of us. With me, she started talking about how she had a plan B for us, that if my husband and I couldn't make it work, I could move in with her and we'd live happy lives together. With my husband, she started talking about her infertility issues and how she wanted to have a kid just like him. She just needed a sperm donor. This all happened at around the same time, and my husband and I compared texts and figured it out. She wanted to take his sperm and have a baby with me. When confronted about it, she refused to admit anything and started lashing out at both of us. It got to the point where she would show up unannounced, banging on the door, demanding a place in our home. It was so terrifying and panic-inducing that we ended up having to move and change our phone numbers. I guess it's so disturbing because I had never had a friend like her, only to find out that she cared about me, but in such an unhealthy and scary way. But yeah, that's my story. Husband and I are great now, BTW. Story 4. A work colleague appeared on the front page of a national newspaper for a life of fraudulent qualifications. He claimed medical and law degrees, was a brigadier in the Army, Reserves, and was the CEO for a major Heath fund. He actually was a brigadier in the Army Reserves, but that and the Heath fund role were largely built on the fraudulent qualifications and a progression of jobs also based on this claims. In reality, the only qualification he actually held was as a mortuary assistant. Not even his wife knew. The fraudulent degrees had been gained when he was in the Army Reserves recruiting, and he had access to submitted position applications. He came undone when he applied for a government job, and some flags were raised by the recruitment people. He tried to withdraw the application, but didn't realize that an application for a government role has the same weight as a statutory declaration and cannot be withdrawn. It all went south very quickly, and he ended up doing jail time. Story 5. I was pretty close with my youngest uncle growing up, at least in pictures. He was in his mid-20s when I was like 5 for context. One day when I was in middle school, he just stopped coming around completely. My entire family told us kids that he was backpacking around the nation. In high school I was going a genealogy project on my grandfather, his dad, and accidentally found my uncle's name on the sex offender registry. Come to find out he was running a CP ring and had served 16 years in federal prison. He's out now, and my family pretends nothing happened. I stay far away. Story 6. While my cousin was walking around with her son in the woods, she came across a hunting stand. She climbed it and found a pair of binoculars. Sitting straight forward and lifting the binoculars to her eyes, she saw her own bedroom window. Let's be logical here. If it was a legit hunting stand, it was facing and closer than 500 feet to a residence, which is illegal, which means it had to come down with prejudice. If it was a peeping Tom, well, it had to come down with prejudice. When my brother and I visited not long after, she showed us where it was. We tore it down and literally wrapped it around a couple trees, bent it to complete uselessness. I got an angry call the next day. Did you tear down a hunting stand yesterday? Yeah, I did. That was your uncle's. Her mother's brother. Turns out my cousin reported it to the family, and they ignored the issue. When the uncle was asked, he said there was just an old treehouse out there. Even when he was exposed, they didn't really care. They were more upset about the damage we did. Suffice it to say I have written off most of that side of the family. Story 7. Met a super nice guy at a networking event when I just starting out in tech. He had a ton of connections and was a nice family man. Super rich. Eventually we became friends, and he was acting as a mentor figure to me in the industry. Went over to his massive new house, met his family, etc. He had the demeanor and looked like Al Borland from Home Improvement, to give you an idea. Like 4 years later, I was looking at the offender registry map for my local area while I was shopping for houses. Lo and behold, his house popped up. In the early 2000s, he was convicted of co-running a commercial underage sales site. Served 5 years for it in federal prison. Story 8. My former church youth pastor was attacking an acquaintance of mine for years and inadvertently caused his death. I met this boy and the youth pastor when I was in middle school. The boy was gay, and it was pretty well known. He was not a regular member of the church, just occasional teen group activities. The first time I ever met the youth pastor, I asked a friend if he was gay. They told me I was crazy. Well, I wasn't. This man was beloved by everyone, and I mean loved. He was the youth leader for over a decade. The last time I ever saw the boy, we were about 16. I ran into him at a store. He told me what had been happening all these years, and that he was finally strong enough to expose him. He told me that either he was going to make the youth pastor confess to the church, or he would go to the police. As far as I know, he followed through with this confrontation because the very next week, the head pastor announced to the church that our youth pastor was quitting, moving back to his home state to go work at the grocery store he used to work at. Yes, a freaking grocery store. They threw him a farewell party. I never saw the boy again, but I do know he didn't get justice because the youth pastor did exactly what he told the church he was going to do. The boy went into a tailspin, as his cousin told me years later, was depressed and got hooked on drags. He overdosed when we were 19. I have lived with this for years and kicked myself for not saying something too. I don't know if I can now. If anyone thinks I can and something will be done, I do know where that youth pastor is now. Story 9. When I was young I had vague ideas about my uncle being dodgy. In that at family events such as weddings etc. my parents would tell me, and some of my cousins to stay away from him. When I was in year 8 we were doing a lesson in citizenship class where we had to cut out pieces from a newspaper, no idea why, and I came across an article saying he'd been recommitted to Broadmoor prison. Went home and Googled him and found out he'd been in prison in the 80s for kidnapping and attacking someone, and had been in and out of prison since for other offenses. He also tried to sue the Sun once for defamation, since they printed something incorrect about him. He was awarded 1p by the court because it technically was defamation, but it was agreed that what they had printed couldn't have damaged his reputation any further. All I know is that he was in a halfway house for a long time. However, from what I've gathered, he was released around 5 years ago. Story 10. I found out when I was an adult that my mother didn't just abandon me one day after work like I had been led to believe. Turns out she had been gang raped. She said they took her wallet and made a disgusting comment about my picture inside. I would have been a toddler at this time, and she was just too scared to go home. She said they followed her. She said when it was over and my stepdad took her to the hospital, they had to stitch everything back together down there. She spent that time away on and off the psych ward. My mom and me still have a rocky relationship for reasons beyond this, but I definitely understand her better. She's had issues with drinking and her mental health all my life, and I really think it's because she's never sought proper help for what happened to her. Underneath all that trauma, drinking, and grief is my mother, and she's one of the most beautiful souls that'll ever walk this earth. For clarification, she stayed in my life, just my grandparents raised me. There was a lot of other drama as well, but none of it worth getting into. Story 11. My brother was stealing money from father who had dementia. This went on for a year, and I found out about it was because the bank who had my father's mortgage called me wondering why it hadn't been paid in 6 months. My father's bank account went into the negative around this time too, and when I confronted my brother about it he said, "Well, I gotta pay him my bills." I was about to take control of all the accounts and make sure shot got back on track, but my father ended up in the hospital and died shortly after that. My brother also stole some of my inheritance too. In the end, he stole over $5,000 from his dying father. Story 12. So my grandmother, who's been estranged from my family for a long time now for a multitude of reasons, has this weird thing where she has to share food with people. Are you ordering steak at the restaurant? Well, oh boy, she's gotta order the same thing, even if she doesn't like steak. Try her drink. It's really good. Take the first bite of chicken to let her know if it's any good. This always really annoyed me cause I hate sharing food. One day I brought it up to my mom and she was like, "Oh yeah, Grandma is afraid of being poisoned, so she wants other people to try it first." So let me get this straight. Grandma thinks someone is trying to poison her, so she has me try the food first? And it makes so much sense looking back because she literally would not take a bite of anything she ordered until someone else had a bite first. Thanks, Grandma. Story 13. Discovered that my sister stole my father's $25,000 Rolex, not more than 24 hours after he died. I only discovered it when her and her husband made a frivolous purchase, and I wondered where they got their money since they were always broke and begging my parents for money. I got suspicious. It hit me that she might have stolen and sold the Rolex. Had the paperwork, ran a track on the sales history, and discovered it had been sold to a pawn shop down the street from where my sister lives. Went to the pawn shop, and after a bit of persuasion got them to tell me who sold it to them, and it was my sister. Me and my mom disowned her. Story 14. As my grandmother took her last breath, she laid there on her bed in her room dead. My mother, sister, brother, aunt, and I were with her. She was an amazing woman. It was a terribly sad event to lose her. My aunt began putting lotion on her hands. At the time, I don't think any of us thought much of it. I think I recall thinking, "That's sweet." It was a little strange, but I just thought she was doing it because my grandma's hands may have looked dry, and it was maybe the last time she'd ever be able to do something like that for her. My sister yells out in a very angry, aggressive tone, "You FING women." And we all kind of step back like, "Well, what the hell just happened? What's going on here?" We're all puzzled looking at my sister like, "What was that about?" She then says she just slipped her rings off her fingers. That was a bad day. My aunt then rushed the sale on the house, even though my mom didn't want to sell it at all. My family has been fractured ever since that day. Story 15. Ex-roommate and good friend got kicked out for not paying rent. A couple months later, a girl goes missing after her shift at Wendy's and turns up murdered. Guy confesses while on mushrooms to police and is released due to his condition when admitting it. Ran into him a couple weeks after, and I could tell something was up. Turned himself in sober the next day. I used to go to work, leaving my girlfriend at the house with him. You think you know someone? Looking back 15 years later, and it all adds up. Story 16. The academic director of my college turned out to be a former USA military that ran away from the country after he was condemned for attacking his 2 stepsons. He was in the ran away for 33 years. He faked his degree documents, used a new name and everything. We only discovered over summer break, when he was discovered, taken to prison and ended it there, while awaited for extradition. The guy claimed he had a doctorate from a university that didn't even exist. Story 17. Figured out a few years after I married my first wife that she had had an ongoing relationship with her first cousin before she met me. I figured it out sitting around a campfire with the way they looked at each other. I always knew he was her favorite cousin, but never knew or suspected anything until that night around the fire. It was just us 3 at that point, and I have always been great at reading people, well except the woman I dated. LOL. Anyway, I just saw a look between them, and I knew without a doubt, and just asked them straight out when they first hooked up. She was so stunned she admitted it instantly and said, "How did you know?" Then she said, "Oh God, I wonder if anyone else in the family figured it out. They slept together off and on for at least 2 years before I met her, but since that time I suspect it was after she met me also." Another fact that was withheld before our marriage was she was bipolar and untreated. Things got back. Lucky to walk away. I divorced her in 2014. I can tell you that as of last year I told a female cousin of hers that hates her guts, so I am sure the family knows now. LOL. Story 18. My grandfather is a ghost on paper. We always grew up knowing he had skeletons in his closet, but I wasn't prepared for what he had done in his younger years. I started hearing rumors as a teen that he had been a pretty big-time robber. His specialty was cracking the safes. But he would never admit it. In 2016, he randomly told me he also used to deal guns to the IRA, like he was talking about the weather. It was bizarre. He also told me he helped a couple of triads hide out in Jamaica after they went on the run for beheading an adversary. They were fairly nice guys according to him. It was only about 10 years ago he finally stopped sleeping with guns stashed under his bed and taking shady phone calls down the bottom of the garden. Only my grandmother knows his real name. No one else in the family does. I adore him, but he is an enigma to me. Story 19. Not so much a secret someone shared with me, but comments someone has made about a particular murder case in the Midwest US. All I'm going to say is that a family member very close to me has consistently, every so often, made comments about a particular murder that happened in the region they grew up. The murderers were caught, but I believe little to no remains were found, and through the investigation, it was discovered that the victims were fed to pigs. My family members' comments have always been vague and don't incriminate them in any way or add new information, yet it has always unsettled me, not just because of the infrequent consistency in which they do it, but the serious/hushed tone they say it in that gives me the impression they could know more than they lead on, be it first-hand or second-hand info. To be fair, rumors spread like weeds in rural America. Doesn't help that at the time of the murders this relative of mine worked at a slaughterhouse run by another family member, another interesting character and ex-biker, and always enjoys everyone's discomfort when they go into gory detail about the process of dispatching various animals, including pigs. Usually at the dinner table. Anyway, this person has always been into true crime, and I don't think many murders happen in the region they grew up, which could explain their fascination. I just can't help but shake the feeling they know something, and sort of want to share it someday. Maybe I'll prod next time I see them. Story 20. My extended family on my mom's side has a strange practice of turning horrific family events into funny stories to tell at family gatherings and the like, I believe mostly as a way to deal with the trauma. The time my grandfather tried to shoot my grandmother in their living room with the kids present, or when my mom got beat for saying Billy D. Williams was hot, were among those stories, both of which were told at Christmas parties, even when I was very young. The only stuff that doesn't get turned into fun stories is the stuff that no one knows how to process and just wants to bury. And that stuff I've only gotten tiny glimpses at, probably for the best. The one that stands out is when my grandmother let slide that my grandfather was in the KKK, participated in lynchings, and was really proud of how good he was at it. Or when I found out later in life that the only reason I saw him growing up when none of my cousins did was that he knew where my mom lived, but not his other kids, and that us not visiting wasn't an option. Which did make sense, considering his house and everything that happened in it was, in retrospect, weird as all hell. Like hanging out with the mute grandkids of his new wife, as they played with dead rats and Barbie clothes in a dollhouse made of reclaimed driftwood levels of weird. Story 21. Finally, I can post this story in one of these. So my now husband, engaged at the time, and I are teachers and did a couple-year stint in bush/rural Alaska. It was pretty intense but a great adventure, learned a lot we wanted and a lot we didn't. We befriended one of our colleagues, an older single man who seemed friendly enough. We would often go over for dinner, go hiking, and go shoot his gun collection at a local rural beach using the school's Honda. Rural life, no animals or local fauna were harmed. He took on the role of an uncle figure for us. We stayed at his Airbnb/spare bedroom at his house in the city on vacation, once too. Now, our second year teaching there, he brings along this young woman at the start of the school year who he claims is his niece, and she never leaves his house. He claimed she was having trouble living with his brother, and she was taking classes online to graduate, and she confirmed this with myself and other women in the village. Cut to spring, she leaves for home separately from this man and people ask why. He claims she patched things up with his brother/her dad and went home. It turns out this girl was basically a young girl he met online, and her father tracked her down after she contacted a local woman about her situation and sent a state trooper to escort her home. She had been reported missing for 8 months prior. Messed up part was, on top of going to court for that situation starting the following summer, he tried to coax another underage girl offline to live with him the following school year, and it turns out that entire chat history was a sting by the FBI. He's in prison now until 2043. Story 22. My best friend in high school had a brother who was only a year older than her. I wasn't close friends with him or anything, but I always liked him when we were younger, in a friendly way. He was always goofy and seemed kind-hearted, even though he did consistently stay in trouble as a teen. He has had a serious drinking problem ever since middle school. I knew he had some demons, but I never thought he was a bad guy. Well, anyway, I lost touch with my friend for a few years after high school. But when we ran into each other a while back, we had a long catch-up session. While talking, I couldn't help but notice that she hadn't mentioned her brother at all. That is odd, considering that he has always been present in her life. So I asked about him. Apparently, her brother had attacked a 12-year-old boy when he was in his mid-20s. The boy's family found out about it and pressed charges against him. I was absolutely shocked. I knew he had some serious emotional issues, and I knew he had been dealing with substance abuse, but I never thought he would do something like that. At most, I imagined him being in and out of jail for random, petty drug-related charges. Or maybe even go to prison for a drug-related felony charge. I never thought this was the direction his life would take. My friend said that she thinks his issues make it extremely difficult to have healthy relationships with people his own age. That he feels safer socializing with people much, much younger. She told me that after the charges were pressed, he was an absolute wreck, as if he were going through a breakup with another adult. It wasn't the charges that bothered him. It was the fact that he seriously considered this kid to be his boyfriend, and he didn't want to lose him. Not that this makes anything he did less messed up. It was just shocking to me to hear just how warped this guy I grew up with was, and I never knew it. All this time, you think you know a guy. Story 23. A former friend of mine, let's call him Doug, admitted to me that he may have attacked and ended someone's life. From what I remember, Doug's ex-wife was a drug addict. She had gotten clean, and they eventually went their separate ways. He moved to CA, she stayed in FL. Doug gets word that some predatory drug dealer got her addicted again, so he conspired with a friend to do something about it. His friend provided him an alibi by dressing like him and using his credit card in a bunch of places. Meanwhile, Doug drives across the country on a motorcycle as fast as possible, taking very few breaks. He found the drug dealer, broke into his home at night, cut his tongue out, set him on fire, and left. He didn't stick around to see if the drug dealer lived or not. Drove back to CA. I'm unsure how much of it is true, but definitely disturbed me at the time. When I knew him, he was sober himself and had spent years as a destructive alcoholic. Story 24. I found this out about one of my most trusted friends during a drunken round of whose childhood was crazier. His older sister had been raped by a neighbor repeatedly over a summer before he had found out. He said he only remembers feeling focused, like he had a job to do. Broke into this man's basement and hid until he went to sleep, went into his bedroom and killed him, stabbed. He then went and told everything to his, at the time, drug dealer uncle, who then went back to the apartment, stabbed the guy again with the same knife, and then called the cops and waited. His uncle served 10 years. My friend served 3 combat tours and is starting medical school next fall. Story 25. There is an engineering professional at my workplace that likes to wear pricey articles of clothing. He even sports a Breitling wristwatch, priced from $3,000 to over $17,000, as his work timepiece. Turns out that he and his wife are buried beneath a mountain of credit card debt, and while I do not look down my nose at him, I definitely view his attire and accessories differently knowing that fact. Story 26. There was this one girl I'd known for a long time, but wasn't massively close to, who we all thought was being terribly controlled by her boyfriend. She would tell us that he decided when he was allowed to drink, when she was allowed to go out, what she was allowed to do, etc., and that he hid things around the house, and that he had started to impose bedtimes for her and shout at her over what seemed like extremely minor things. We all thought he was awful and encouraged her to leave. Then she moved in with me, and I realized she was extremely emotionally unstable and an alcoholic. Within months, I found myself wanting to do, or in some cases actually doing, all the things she said her controlling boyfriend had done. I remember one time, after trying to remain patient with her for a while, she said one thing that was relatively minor, and it was the last straw. I just snapped and screamed at her. I then got phone calls from all our mutual friends to talk about my behavior and anger management, presumably as a result of the story being told back to them in a somewhat biased way. So, in a way, her secret changed my opinion of him. So to make myself feel better about that, I'll add a few more details. While I did gain an understanding of much of his controlling behavior and had a much less black and white view of him and of their relationship, he was no saint. He was very far from it, in fact. For instance, he had been physically violent with her, and this was corroborated by others. There were plenty of times I got so angry I felt like raising a hand to her, and I walked away to calm down. There is never an excuse to actually hit someone. What I would say is that they were both abusive, but I had a much less black and white view of both of them after getting to know her better. Story 27. I just found out yesterday that my wife, who is 29, a teacher, started an affair with a student who is 18, of hers about 2 months ago. We have been together for 10 years and married for 4. We have a 4-month-old daughter, and she threw it all away: career, marriage, and family. I had no idea anything was wrong until 6 days ago when I found her crying in bed, and she told me she was depressed, no longer in love with me, and suicidal, mostly because of my drinking habits. I took sole responsibility, swore off drinking, and had us signed up for marriage counseling the same day, plus got her in contact with a postpartum depression group. 6 days later, she is sent to a crisis center by her school, and I find out everything after the psychiatrist there makes her tell me the truth when I show up to bring her home. My life is so fucked right now that I can't even sleep, and I'm holding a 4-month-old baby, trying not to cry, while her cheating mother is 5 miles away in a hospital room. Safe to say I will never see my wife the same way again. Story 28. There was a woman, whom I considered my friend for many, many years. She had cancer, survived it, but it was still there and created many problems. She even appeared on TV shows as an advocate for cancer patients, did a lot of political activism, was very much opposed to euthanasia, published some books. Then one fine day, through a series of coincidences, it turned out that her cancer had never existed. She had completely made it up. A big fat whopping lie. I would feel ashamed because I fell for it for so long, except that a lot of other people fell for it too, including professionals, doctors, nurses, priests. Needless to say, it ended that friendship, and it made me think a lot about how easily fooled we all are. Oh, by the way, she has died by now. Of cancer. I'm not kidding. Not the cancer she had made up, of course. Karma can be such a b. Story 29. Sibling set of cousins, my third cousins. 2 sisters and a brother. The youngest sister, she is 31 this year, this happened in about 2009-ish, was dating a mixed-race guy, one parent black, the other white. I didn't realize how racist the family was. They told her to leave him immediately, and when they found out she not only hadn't left him, but was also now having the nasty with him, her siblings beat her up while their father watched, and they forced her onto a plane to the EU the next day, black eye and all. Had her personal documents seized by her sister, and was basically a prisoner to her. I found out about a year later about this when our other cousin told me. I can never look at anyone in that family again the same way, and it's so sad because as a kid I was very fond of them. The older sister had a coffee shop which my dad used to take us to a lot, and I think that's where he met my stepmom. I am not sure if this is a secret now since my mom knows and I didn't tell her. Though at the time my cousin asked me to keep it quiet because it was top secret and very sensitive information. I don't know if any of the family know that I know about this as well. If any of them ever read this, you guys suck.